Thank you. Yeah, so welcome to my presentation, Open Source for Sustainable and Long-Lasting Phones. A bit about me, my name is Luca Weiss. I'm an Android platform engineer at Fairphone, and also open source maintainer and contributor, more in the software space, not in the hardware space. But working on projects such as PostMarketOS, directly the Linux kernel, and OpenRazor. And you can find me on Mastodon. So let's talk about a bit about the digital industry. So the digital industry in total has about 4% of the global greenhouse gas emission impact, and about 10% of the world's electricity consumption. But that's not everything. It also uses a lot of minerals and fresh water, and also has obviously a lot of social impacts on the world. Of these greenhouse gas emissions, about 84% are actually used for device production, and only 16% are used for actually running it, so for the networks and data centers. So let's look at our smartphone from Fairphone. There are 1.3 billion phones sold every year. The average lifetime of any single phone that a person has is 2 to 3 years. And only less than 20% are recycled. E-waste is the fastest growing waste stream on Earth, with more than 50 million tons per year. And this is almost 4,500 Eiffel Towers per year. And also informally, more than 60 millions of people around the world are working in the sector to dispose the electronic waste, but mostly very informally. So this is very they don't have proper protections, and it's very hazardous to the environment and to their lives actually. So what can we do to improve this situation? So we actually started in 2010. It was back then just an awareness campaign started by Bas van Aber, our founder, and some other people. And was really just an awareness campaign on conflicts minerals in the beginning. And to just show what is actually happening. It was part of the Waag Society in Amsterdam, and this is a tech incubator there. But then after a few years of campaigning, they actually realized it wasn't actually creating any alternatives. It was just showing how it is done. And so the best way to understand and to influence was to actually be part of it. And so Fairphone BV was born, which as a small social enterprise with a huge ambition to actually change the electronics industry from the inside out. So social enterprise here means that the financial profitability is only a means to actually achieve other social and environmental impacts. Apparently it's loading. Thank you, Wi-Fi. Amazing. Sorry for that. I think the Wi-Fi doesn't want me to make more. Oh well, I fall back to the PDF version. Where is it? Presentation. So here we are. Actually, with no prior experience in the phone industry, it was most of the successful crowdfunding campaigns in the EU since about 10 years. And our crowdfunding campaign wasn't done via normal ways, for example Kickstarter, but actually on our own website. Okay, now I need to change twice, which is a bit annoying. So our mission is actually, by establishing a market for ethical electronics, we motivate the industry to act more responsibly. And it's actually still our mission today. We were founded with the purpose of creating a better electronics industry. So let's look at the different Fairphone devices. So we launched with Fairphone 1 in 2013, then Fairphone 2 in 2015, and got 4 major Android version upgrades and about 7 years of software support. and it was actually going until like earlier this year. Version 3 we launched in 2019, and actually just got the Android 13 update yesterday. Same with the Version 3 Plus and Version 4. We launched in 2021, and there we also promised 7 years of software support. So let's look at the 4 impact areas that we have at Fairphone: fair material sourcing, fair factories, longevity, and reuse and recycling. So first impact area is fair sourcing. We have in our phones, or like in any phone really, there's over 50 materials contained in it, and of those we selected 14 focus materials, which you can see here, where we think that they make the biggest impact, where we can improve the most. Why exactly we have these materials? So like magnesium, nickel, cobalt, plastics, lithium. Why we actually have these, have selected these, we actually have published on our website with all the reasoning behind it. So like in terms of why we think these are very important. Here's a quick overview of like the fair material sourcing status. So unfortunately, we're not at 100% of everything is well sourced, but at least we know how much we still have to improve. We also publish this information on our website, and you can see like we have a mix of fair mines, so where it is coming from certified mines that have better working conditions. We have the recycled elements, so like here a few, where it is recycled. We also have some gold that is compensated through credits, so like a mass balance system, and the rest is still conventionally mined or unknown. And while we have in 2022 we had about 40% of fair material sourcing, we actually plan to have 70% by the end of 2023. So, kind of the reason why. Basically, the supply chain is a very complex structure. So it starts at the bottom with a bunch of miners, then goes up to a bunch of to fewer traders, but also a lot still, and then going through a long process of kind of going through some smelters, either directly to some other material manufacturers or again to traders, and then to a lot of component manufacturers that are included in the electronics, and then still it goes, some go even further, and then finally they land at the final assembly manufacturer. And unfortunately, we cannot just rely on the final assembly manufacturer to tell us, oh, everything's perfect, all the materials are well sourced, but we actually have to dig down and like actually get the fair materials into even like the lower tier manufacturers that are used in in making other components for the product. So, and we actually have we actually map the journey of these materials, and this we also publish on our website. You may ask why, and this is one reason is that we want to scale scale the fair sources, so get more of these into our supply chain, and also because we want to have followers. We want to have other companies actually do the same for their materials. This is one of the primary missions of Fairphone, to not just do it ourselves, but actually to show the industry that's possible, and also encourage them to also do the same. So this is we have also the whole thing is map version published on a website called SourceMap, and there you can actually follow the different materials through their journeys. For example, here you can see for tungsten, it comes from a mine in Rwanda, then it goes to a refiner in Austria actually. And then it goes over to China, to a different manufacturer, and then finally to the final assembly manufacturer where the actual phone is being produced. And for all of this, we have a long list of all the suppliers, smelters, and refiners on our website. So you can look through exactly like who is making is getting the tungsten, who is making this into one of the components that we have in the phone. So let's go into the second impact area that we have: production. So China is the largest manufacturer of smartphones, also in big parts to Chinese brands such as Huawei, Xiaomi, Meizu, etc. But also Apple and many other smartphone manufacturers have their phones produced there. Some of the reasons are, for example, Chinese workers just have different salary expectations to other countries. So they just earn less money, aka our products cost less. But also many of the materials that are used in the phones actually come from China. So we choose our production partners not only by the technological requirements, but also the willingness to actually work on improvements to the social and environmental performance, and also the willingness to improve the work conditions for the employees. So based on discussions with workers in the factories, we defined the need to work on 46 different improvements. Most are in the worker satisfaction category, but we also have health and safety and worker representation and living wage. 2 years ago, we only had 16 improvements there, so we added quite a few more that we are focusing on. So let's talk a bit about living wage. The living wage is kind of defined as the amount of money earned without overtime to earn a decent wage to ensure good living and working conditions. This is like kind of the whole kind of amount of money, so like $28 per day in this example. And currently there's quite a big gap of what's missing between the living wage and kind of what the daily wage would be without any overtime. What we are aiming to do is actually closing this gap. So for all the time that a factory worker spends on the production line for Fairphone, we're actually compensating all of this gap, which is actually just resulting in about $2 per phone. So by adding $2 a phone, $2 per phone to the cost, we can actually ensure that the people on the assembly line actually have a good working life. And actually, also based on their decisions, like we are not just paying this bonus to the people directly that are working on the production line, but we're actually splitting it evenly across all the workers in the factory. So it's not just workers that are on our production line get this money, but everybody gets their split. And this was also with discussions with the workers there, so that they don't feel sorry. Yeah, so don't feel discouraged. So let's look at the third impact area that we have, which is longevity. So our phones are designed to be repairable. It is a modular smartphone. For older generations, we also had upgraded modules available. So, for example, the phone launched with a camera module, but you could actually upgrade it to a better camera module over the lifetime. But for the most part, we're really doing it to be repairable. So any user can, like if the camera breaks after warranty expires, they can just take a screwdriver, buy a new camera module and just put it in. You just need one screwdriver, maybe 10 minutes of your time, and it's replaced. You don't need to go to any shop. We actually also have the schematics for our Fairphone 4 published. So the whole kind of board view, but also the actual schematics. So if you do want to do some like board level repair, you can actually find the schematics on our website. So long-term software support. According to a study from the European Commission, they estimated about 20% of users actually changed the smartphone because of a lack of software support. and we are trying to change that and make users not want to stop using their phone because of software support. It's kind of some people may ask, why do we actually need updates? Well, any software has issues, and we need to be able to fix these issues. Also, new security vulnerabilities are announced every month by Google, and also in between by from other company or from other places. But also, we want to add new features to the phone. For example, with new Android versions comes better permission management, better autofill, etc. So let's look a bit about what that means on Android. So bringing Android to a phone is quite a complex effort between different stakeholders. So we really start with a new Android version from the Android open source project. Then normally the SoC vendor that provides the SoC for the phone, they do some modifications to it and make their software make the software compatible with their SoC. Then the device manufacturer, so in this example us, we integrate this, also add the changes that are needed for our exact phone, so for the display, for the vibration motor. Then there's a bunch of operator requirements testing that operators want. And then we also need still launch approval from both Google and the operators to actually be able to ship the update to end users. For a normal software update, so just for example on Android 13 from one Android 13 version to the next Android 13 version, it is a bit different. There we get security patches from Google, also from Qualcomm, and some updates from network operators, and we all have to integrate these together into the final build that we have. But also here, we need again to get the approval from Google and the approval from the network operators, so we can ship the update. And while Android itself and some modifications from Qualcomm, which are shaped under the name CodeLinaro, while they're actually open source, there's also a lot of proprietary components going into the final build, which are here with the red lines. And also the Android code is actually just running on one of the processors in the SoC. There's also a lot of other processors in there that are responsible for the modem and for audio processing and for many other parts. So it's really just the code for one of these parts is actually open source. The rest is all proprietary. So, what happens when this chain is broken? So, for example, for Fairphone 3 and Android 11, we just didn't get any support from the SoC manufacturer anymore. So then, this is generally where the software support in the industry just stops, because no other manufacturer is normally willing to extend the lifetime of the phone afterwards. So let's look a bit at Fairphone 2. It was released in 2015 with Android 5. In 2016, it got an Android 6 update, but even back then already the SoC went end of life. And this is where other phones with the same SoC ended support, for example, Nexus 5 or some different Sony phones. However, in 2018, we made an Android 7 upgrade. In 2021, we did an Android 9 upgrade, and in 2022, we did Android 10 update. And this was supported, as I said before, until earlier this year. So kind of to understand how we did this, we need to dig a bit into it. So we took over a bit of the role of the SoC manufacturer here. We reused some proprietary parts from Android 6. And we kind of checked the open source code that is for newer still supported devices. So for devices that did receive Android 7. And also we looked a lot at the open source community, for example, LineageOS. There we didn't really take the entire parts over, but more it's about getting a reference of how it can work and how it works well together. So for all of our Fairphone devices, we try to enable communities like LineageOS by providing an unlockable bootloader to actually open source all the code we can. So for Fairphone 2, which is now end of life, and Fairphone 3, not yet Fairphone 4, but we're working on it, you can actually find complete build instructions where you can download all of the Android code. You can grab the binary blobs and put it into your build and actually build a complete Android system, which is more or less equivalent to what is shipped with the phone, minus the Google apps and some DRM things. Yeah, and we do this all on code.fairphone.com. So, our theory of change. We have a couple of different ways how we want to change the industry. The first is just to raise awareness by doing videos, blogs, speaking at conferences like this. We actually want to set an example of how it can be done. So we showed that it can be done to support a phone for 7 years. And also for our upcoming phones, we are planning for 7 or 8 or even more years of software support. And we want to motivate the industry by doing this. We work together with the big players to actually try to change them how they work and try to get the improvements into their products also. Thank you.
The floor is open for questions. Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, yeah. So I have a question regarding this supporting a phone for 7 years. So what about this zero-day vulnerability and all that I have now? I have a phone that is now 7 years old. The SOC vendor is not supporting it, right? So there might be some zero-day vulnerability on some black market that is related to some rootkit or something that, let's say AOSP or these, let's say custom ROM in Lineage or what you are providing hasn't been discovered, and I have, let's say, all my financial apps and everything here. How secure is it? Can a consumer of your phone trust with this kind of vulnerabilities?
I mean, I hope they can. No, so I mean, we try to provide quarterly updates to all our phones. Sometimes a bit more, but it's as I showed, like it's a long process of getting through all the approvals. So it's quite some work to get this done. But we are always trying to get the latest security updates out to people as soon as possible.
Hello. Hi. Thank you.
Hi.
Actually, I have 2 questions, I think. The first one is maybe you can better explain what do you mean by when the software is packed, you need approval by Google to actually launch it. It would be really interesting for me to understand it. If it's enforced by the license, do you pay them? Yeah, these kind of questions. And the other thing, I also wonder, so you're kind of using vanilla Android distribution, right? Why don't you just have like contribute to the Lineage.js project with like another support for your phone? Yeah.
Okay, so the Google approval is really required for any Android device that is shipped with the Google services, so Google mobile services, so aka the Play Store and all the other Google apps that are shipped with the phone, which, to be honest, most people want. There's for sure some people that don't want it, but the vast majority expect it because it's the way they expect to get the apps. So any phone that launches with Google services, they need to go through the CTS compatibility test suite and a bunch of other test suites that Google provides. And they need to, it's like millions of tests, and every single one of them needs to pass. Otherwise, you don't get approval by Google to actually ship the update. So there's more of a, you can make an Android version without Google services and just launch it and just do whatever you want with it. Most of Android is licensed under the Apache 2 license, so you can really do whatever you want for the most part. I think unless you use the word Android, or maybe there's some other, I don't know exactly about the trademark details there. So kind of, yeah. There's a lot of tests, and all of them need to pass for this. Second part was Lineage.js. Yeah, so also there it's a bit, Lineage.js doesn't ship with Google services, so you cannot use it. Also, they don't implement a bunch of the operator requirements that we have. For example, voice over LTE support, voice over Wi-Fi, and also a bunch of UI customizations that we do for the operators. So it just gives us a lot more flexibility. And also, at least in the past, it was a kind of a problem to get the CTS tests passing with LineageOS, because they do some modifications that are not expected by the test suite.
I was wondering how you set the price point for the Fairphone when you first released it. So, for example, you could argue, Tesla did the approach that they made a super expensive product first, so they have the resources to put a lot of money into the product. But for me, it seems like you chose more, you wanted to have like a mid-range or budget phone. But yeah.
So I think you cannot really compare it with Tesla because it was kind of the first major EV manufacturer back then. And like when we launched, like there were already lots of phones and lots of established phone manufacturers. I mean, we don't. If you look at our current devices, we don't really have a defined way of like which, like if we do a high-end phone or mid-end phone or whatever. It's like the Fairphone 1 was more of a mid-end, low-end phone. Fairphone 2 had a Snapdragon 800 processor, so kind of high-end phone. And now we are kind of in between the like Qualcomm 600 series and Qualcomm 700 series, which is like mid to high-end. And I think it's quite a bit more difficult to convince people to put a lot of money into a mobile phone compared to an electric car, I guess, because the novelty factor is less of a thing, I would say.
Hello, I have a question. Do you think in the future, or if it's like it's already planned, that you use different chips at Qualcomm or different architecture like RISC-V processors?
So I think from our perspective, like the architecture of the main processor doesn't really matter too much as long as Android is running on it, because the user won't know in the end. And I think like how Apple did it with like transitioning from x86 to ARM, like the users didn't care. Like as long as the applications continue to work, they don't really mind. So I would say like if an SoC manufacturer comes out with a good competitive chipset that runs Android and where they support Android and is based on RISC-V, I don't really see a problem with using that. It's just that nothing exists so far. And we also don't really have the volumes to develop something on our own.
More questions? Well, any more questions? I mean, we just comment, when we were showing this, Qualcomm designing basically when is end of life of the support and basically end of life of anything which follows that. It's kind of crazy that the same company which is interested to sell the next generation is the one decided the end of life of the previous. So just, current nonsense of the system. But yeah, if there are no other questions, let's thank the speaker again. Thank you.
Thank you.